Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fruition Group's Diary of a CIO podcast. I'm absolutely delighted this morning to welcome some friendly, well-known faces to the podcast series. We have Pete Cotton and Ed Marshall, who have recently both joined Enablis as Chief Customer Officer and CTO. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So, very quick intros to our guests this morning. First of all, Pete. Pete specializes in delivering and building large-scale technology solutions in complex environments, whilst retaining a lean and agile approach, which really works to get the best out of engineers. Pete spent over 10 years working for OpenBet, and he went on to become Chief Commercial Officer at InfinityWorks, where he helped to deliver services to organisations such as Sainsbury's Bank, Hermes and Burberry, so a wealth of experience. Outside of work, Pete enjoys sport, philosophy and drinking wine, in any order.
All together.
Yeah, all at the same time. Excellent. And then we have Ed. So Ed Marshall is a highly competent CTO whose key strengths really lie in bringing together technology, process and strategy, helping deliver strategic benefits to customers. Ed's experience spans multiple sectors, including online education, betting and gaming, and finance. Ed was also at InfinityWorks, where he helped to deliver services to organisations such as Experian, Sky Bet, and the NHS. And prior to joining Enablis, Ed spent 2 years as CTO at Hedgehog. Outside of work, and again, not in any order, whiskey, but the investment in whiskey rather than drinking.
I mean, probably both.
Bit of both. Racing cars, not following the whiskey drinking, and photography. And also is a busy dad to 2 young children. Both Pete and Ed collectively together were instrumental in the growth of InfinityWorks, helping to grow that organisation to over 650 consultants before they were acquired by Accenture a few years ago. So welcome, guys. Hopefully that intro is a fairly good reflection of your experience. So we'll delve in with some questions. And I always ask the same questions to kick off this podcast. And I'm going to come to you first, Ed, if that's okay. So was it your childhood dream to become a CTO? And at what stage did you know you wanted to get there? And were there any particular risks that you had to take?
Probably not my childhood. My childhood dreams were probably I feel like in my childhood it was either be an astronaut or a firefighter or something along those lines. But I don't know. I got into tech, I think, and like probably many do, you arrive in tech and all of a sudden you're surrounded by these people who have a wealth of knowledge, and it's easy to be really bowled over by that. And I guess to some extent, I would say I sort of was on the lines of an imposter syndrome style approach, just assuming everyone was better than me, and I was lucky to be where I was. I think there's a changing point though where you start to recognize that it's not about somebody's technical prowess. Maybe it's more around their actual ability within a workplace to deliver, to be effective, to deliver value. And I think slowly as I hit that kind of point in maturity in my career, I started to sort of reevaluate probably my own skills and strengths, etc., and thought, well, where do I want to go? Where does this lead me from a career path? I was fortunate to have some great sort of leaders in the position of CTO at previous businesses, the likes of Dick Moore at Learn Direct and Andy Burton at Sky Bet as well, sort of call out to them. And for me, really, they kind of, I guess, set a good template that I looked towards and wanted to in terms of what the kind of skills to bring to bear were and how to go about that role. And I guess, probably 10 years or so ago, I sort of thought, right, that's it. That's where I'm going. Yeah. Set the targets, and then the opportunity to work in consulting arrived, and it's just been an absolutely brilliant vehicle to deliver me experience across industries and different clients and different challenges and stuff as well.
Was that a key kind of pivotal moment in your career of making that choice, do you think, going down the consulting route rather than working directly for customers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I couldn't have got the experience in any other way. And I feel, in essence, I kind of gained probably 50% or 100% more experience in the same sort of period of time. So whilst it meant I was more pushed, and there's pros and cons, but I think definitely for me, from a career trajectory point of view, the consulting move was a really, really good one and really well timed as well.
So, thinking about the demands of any C-level role, it's hard work, right? I guess. Pete, how do you balance the challenges of, I guess, personal life with work without compromising on either? And can balance be achieved? And what strategies do you kind of adopt to make that work for you?
I think there's probably a few parts to that for me, and it's something that I'd have to confess I don't think I've ever perfected. I think you're always striving for different ways of balancing day to day, and obviously through your career, you go through different cycles of different demands, and sometimes it's you need to really be at a certain place in the country for a little period of time, or you've got certain time demands on you. So I'm always searching for the right balance, I suppose. But a couple of things I would highlight. I think one of them is really common to people in our kind of work, which is exercise. I think we get such a heavy mental workout through the week that actually pushing our bodies a little bit outside of that is really, really important. So that's something I found it helps. It's where the sport comes in, into my hobby list. The other one for me is a bit more unusual, I think, potentially, which is I, I guess one thing I'm really bad at resting. So when I get home from work or whatever, a lot of people like to sort of just chill out, zone out in front of the TV and stuff. And I do that a little bit, but at the same time, I find it really hard to stop my brain. So when I'm lying at bed at night or I'm just on the commute or I'm going on a run somewhere, I'm constantly trying to I can't help but gravitate back to the challenges that I'm facing and things I try to do. So what I've actually found is that it seems kind of the opposite of how you would rest, but I actually feel like I need to do something else alongside work that's mentally stimulating because it gives me then a sort of varied set of puzzles to be solving rather than it always going back to the same things. So about 15 years ago, I started doing work, extra academic work through Open University and things like that. And part of the reason for that was I found that it kind of stimulated my brain in some slightly different ways and meant that rather than just stew on the things I was doing all day, all of the time, I'd be thinking about those instead. So for me, a change is as good as a rest, I suppose. It just gave me different things to kind of think about. I'm just bad at resting, so I need to do different things.
That's really good advice, though, isn't it? Because people automatically assume balance means taking time off, switching off your brain, doing nothing. But actually, it's about, I guess, tuning into you as a human being, what makes you tick. So yeah, it's interesting.
And I tried those things for a long time. You listen to it, obviously it's good to listen to people's advice and thoughts on these things, but I just found it just didn't work for me. I can't switch off. So I had to find something different. I guess my best advice would be to find what works for you, I suppose. Like what works for me probably won't work for everybody.
So, Ed, as a CTO, I guess there's many different facets to that role. What parts do you personally find most challenging, and how do you approach these on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, great question. I think the CTO role probably, or at least in my experience, does vary quite significantly. I talked before around when did I choose, the path of the CTO and how that looks like. I think the reality is that a CTO in a product business is very different to a CTO in a consultancy business. And in a consultancy business, really, it's kind of double the importance dialed down on things like building the right culture. And I think probably the hardest part is to get yourself into the position where you're underway on a brand new project delivery. You've got a team that's aligned, a team that's got an understanding of what it is you're building. Everyone on that team is bought into what they're building and delivering value. And you feel you can sit back at the end of the day saying, I genuinely think we're making the best progress possible and we're doing it in the right way. Now, it sounds really simple, like why wouldn't everyone be on that page? But the reality is the real world and constraints you face into, when you bring a team together for the first time, all that kind of things come into play, do hamper that. And I think for me, it's building effective teams as it's what we do day in, day out. I still feel that getting that absolutely right and, bring everyone together and really delivering value you stand up and proud with, that's really where the challenge of the role is. And that's probably the bit I enjoy the most as well.
And that's not specific to being in consulting, right? I guess maybe more honed in the consulting world than perhaps in a when you're working for an end customer.
Yeah, maybe you just go through the cycle a few more times in consulting. I think that's probably obviously, your purview with different customers' accounts and teams, etc., changes. But yeah, no, it's true to everyone really, and everyone. I'm not necessarily one for going too far into, I'm not like to be an author on team dynamics, etc. But I do feel it's kind of the crucial bit that you've got an organization that's there supporting enabled the team have got the resources, they understand what they're doing and they're delivering in an effective way, sounds great. Getting there usually is where the challenge is along the way.
Don't know what you think, Ed, but I've often thought that understanding technology people is as important as understanding technology.
Yeah.
Because often, technology is a huge spectrum of different things that you're never going to be a master in all of them. But if you understand technology people, you get that sense of how do you enable them to do what they need to do, and how do you understand very quickly what they're trying to achieve and build the right kind of dynamics with them. You get that through understanding technology people as well as technology.
You do, yeah. I think it just plays to the strengths of, call them what you will, soft skills, core skills, or whatever. I think the importance of that are usually underestimated in most businesses. But you're right, the tech, despite how complicated tech is, and I can't actually think of many industries where the tooling that you're meant to be proficient in changes so significantly, so rapidly, and also people's interpretation or style is so different between individuals. Yet I would still say the technology is the easy part in most cases.
And are there any kind of tips or strategies that you approach to get to know those people within your teams and organizations?
I think it's good to know people on a human level rather than just be about the job. So it's good to try and learn what makes a person tick, try and understand them, a bit of the psychology of it all, I suppose. I think the more you go into to higher levels of leadership and things like that, the more it becomes a job of psychology as much as anything else, to understand what makes different personality types work, and how do you communicate with huge swathes of people effectively and build cohesive teams and organizations. But for me, it starts at that personal level. I mean, ultimately, if you go and get you're building the right kind of teams and working with the right kind of people, you've got folks that just want to do a good job, and your job as a leader is to support and unlock that potential as best you can. And everyone's on the same page in terms of wanting it to be like that, I think. So for me, it's all a bit about trying to understand the person and how you get the best out of them. And it's something I've learned through my career. I mean, I think everyone, when they're new to leadership of any sort, you kind of make a few mistakes. You don't appreciate those differences in people initially. And I remember seeing, actually, in the early days of my career, there was someone that I was probably not the best manager of that person. Saw someone else deal with them and thought, wow, their personality style is such a better fit for that character. And it made me realize how I've got to be a bit of a kind of chameleon to be the best leader I can be, to work with different types of people and get the best out of them.
So looking ahead, the last couple of years have been an interesting landscape for anybody working in technology. What do you think are the kind of three main priorities for CTOs, CIOs for the next 12 months? Pete, I'll come to you with that.
I mean, cost will remain a priority, I think, to make sure that the investment is used wisely, and that economy of things is still going to be important for a long time to come yet. And we know that technology obviously is a big enabler on that front. If used wisely, investment in technology can help make things more efficient. It can take the kind of stress and the time consumptive elements out of certain tasks. So I think that cost and using technology investment wisely will be a big priority still. Another really obvious one, I think, is how to use artificial intelligence, and that probably overlaps a little bit with the first one there as well. There's a new tool in the kit bag, and I think most organizations are trying to figure out what the best way to deploy that is, and often it is to try to make things a little bit more efficient or do things a little bit better and more easily. And I think that for me, the third one is around social responsibility. And I think one of the nicest things about the kind of probably the last 5 to 10 years and the way that society and the zeitgeist has developed is that there's a real strong social conscious about things like sustainability and diversity in the workforce. And I think no organizational leader in the present day can ignore those aspects. I think how do we use technology to build sustainable solutions? How do we get the right balance in our workforces, and things like that are always going to be near the top of the priority list. So I think for me, cost effectiveness, artificial intelligence, and social responsibility are probably the three things that I think are close to the top of everybody's list.
I was going to say, I think just following on from that as well, there's maybe I'm slightly more biased, but I found that there's a perception that people presume where everyone is on those journeys. So you mentioned things like integrating AI into the workplace and sustainability and everything. I think, a lot of people spend a lot of time on, various, Hacker News articles and things like that. And I think everyone's expectation of the industry is is that it is further along than it is. I did an event recently around AI, and we asked everyone in the room to put their hand up who is using AI either in the production system or as part of their day-to-day business workflow. And about 40, 45 people, I think 4 people put their hands up. And that was an event where you should really see a higher number of people represented. So I still think a lot of people are still going through those journeys, and I still think that's kind of the roadmap for the next couple of years.
Most definitely. I did notice actually recently the quality of Ed's output improved quite radically, and it turns out that AI is doing most of it.
It's a good job I cannot write.
Do you think AI is just that? It's just another tool in the kit bag. It's not going to have this huge impact that people are expecting. What's your opinion in terms of you're a CIO, a CTO looking at how you utilize AI across the business?
I think for me, I think it will be both transformational and business as usual. And what I mean by that is, if you think about it, really, technology's original promise was coming into the marketplace and being disruptive and changing how things are done. So we shouldn't be nervous of technology replacing technology here. I think the reality is though that there's kind of competencies, and you can test these AI models, and they're very good at specific tasks. But in almost every conversation I have, the goal or the sweet spot is that AI does kind of 80% of the boring stuff, really, the stuff that is a little bit repetitive and can be handled in that way. And then the individual's experience and capability and role moves more to the 20%, but doing a better job in that. So, I rarely come across people in business, especially given the last couple of years, who have lots of free time. So I think getting a bit of capacity back to be able to focus on what we're trying to achieve and what our overall quality level is, I think AI is, that kind of superpower there. But I do think it's really applicable in different ways, depending on your industry. It has its own, like any tool, it's got trade-offs and it's got its own strengths and weaknesses as well.
I don't think it's fundamentally any different to the paradigm shifts we've been through from the internet, smartphones, cloud. All of these things represent a step change that usually take 5-6 years for different businesses to get to grips with how can we best utilize that new tool that exists. So I think what the two things you said earlier both are true. I think it's both a new tool in the kit bag and a significant step change in how technology can be utilized. Nothing scary or to worry about. I think it's just something that can unlock a lot of potential that at the moment is, I think it's exciting.
As significant as something as big as the cloud, would you say, AI?
I think so.
Yeah, big time. It's absolutely excellent at writing. I use it to write custom bedtime stories for my kids that involves like all of their worlds. I do that all the time, and they love it.
Brilliant way of using it. So just taking what Pete said about cost optimization being a key priority for CIOs, if we can just draw a little bit on your experience, Ed, obviously the past couple of years have been challenging for many tech organizations, and doing more with less is a common theme, I guess, that you've had to experience both internally and with customers. What approaches have kind of proved essential, I guess, in maintaining business operations, but also kind of being open for future growth?
Yeah, I think with obviously there was a boom, especially in things like COVID, in the scale of workforces and the number of systems that people had deployed. And I think we're probably feeling some of the pain points now as some of these systems start to become a bit legacy and a bit obsolete. Yet whilst obviously budgets and things like that are still in the recovery process really effectively. I would say cost optimization in itself, that there are activities you can do that can enable to reduce your costs, but really it's having a cost-effective technology platform underpinning your business. It needs to be designed with that in mind. Unfortunately, we still have quite a lot of projects which, especially in the consultancy world, you would tend to get involved with quite late in the day potentially. And cost optimization is something that happens after the service has gone live and you get your first AWS bill at the end of the month, and then suddenly it becomes a priority. But the reality is, at that point, you're already on the back foot because you've not designed it with cost in mind. And the cloud offers some amazing capabilities, to be able to, have these dynamic services that spin up based on user demand. Unfortunately, there's still quite a few people building kind of classic data centers in the cloud, which are incredibly expensive propositions to run. I think, when we talk about cloud optimization, post the kind of lift and shift era. I think that's where we're getting to, but it does require a design eye, I think, to be able to really get true value for money out of these services.
And then as we move forward, Pete, hopefully with a more optimistic investment climate, what should companies focus on when they're evaluating their teams, technology and processes for the year ahead? What are the key things that they should be looking for?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And I think the two things that I would call out there are, one, prioritization. I think when the to-do list's growing and growing because you've lacked maybe that little bit of investment and the ability to kind of action the projects and the things that you want to do, there's a tendency to try to kick off a lot altogether. And as tempting as that is, I think it's really good for any business owner to think about how do we prioritize this and make sure we start with the most important thing on the to-do list rather than try too much at once and end up doing, compromised jobs of each thing that there is to do there. And I think that the complement to that is also the readiness to go. Organizations can get a little bit rusty as a delivery pipeline, as a team that are well oiled and producing things. So I think that we'll probably end up in quite a few environments where teams just need a little bit of a kickstart and a help to rediscover the kind of mojo when it comes to delivering technology projects. It's been obviously a difficult few years and a quieter few years in terms of real heavy investment into tech projects. And I would really suggest that organizational leaders focus on what is it that would be really important to get started sooner, and how are we going to bootstrap this to sort of rediscover how to get tech out effectively and in a secure way.
It's a good point, though. I think probably one of the most common things we see when we talk to businesses about things like technology strategy and how the business and technology interact is probably trying to do too much, because it's really difficult to put a good idea on the back burner because you're all there thinking that sounds great, we'd be a better business for it. But it does take kind of true will and determination, I think, to say, yeah, I know we've got 25 good ideas, but we're only going to do 5. So, I do see a lot of businesses in sort of paralysis where they've not delivered the 5 critical things because they've attempted the 25 full list. And I think that's still pretty commonplace in our business, but it does take a strength in leadership and a bit of resolve around kind of priorities, as Pete says there, I think, to make that happen.
And what about the team piece that you mentioned, Pete, in terms of, getting your teams ready for kind of delivering some of these new technology projects, new changes that businesses want to adopt? How do you do that?
Yeah, there's probably a slightly nuanced answer depending on the organization and what they've been doing in the last few years, whether they've rapidly ramped up and they've got to kind of, that's where people need to seek help often, just to get the wheels turning again. It could just be that they're lacking a couple of key roles or a little bit of experience in a few places to make things work. It could be that in the last few years there are developments that make them want to change slightly the way that they approach the projects that they would have done differently in the past. And I think, to be honest, that's where a lot of our experiences come to the fore, because we're involved in an ecosystem where you're constantly doing tech delivery projects by the dozen at all times. You do never kind of you never lose your sharpness, and you're always relevant and up to date with what's being done at the time. So I think it could just be a little bit of help to get organizations kick-started and back on track. And if there are places where they're just a lot of it's about scale. Sometimes they've got a capacity and a capability, but they need help getting from a single squad to, say, several squads doing work. And again, it's just that help with how do you get from doing it in one work stream to do it in several, and making sure it all works cohesively, effective, and things aren't treading on each other's toes. But that's the sort of thing that we do all of the time. So, I'm fairly sure we'll end up helping a lot of organizations do that kind of thing.
I guess you both have been in the market for a long period of time and seen these fluctuations previously over the last 20 odd years. Where have you seen businesses go wrong when we're coming out of these, I guess, tougher times, and what lessons should people perhaps learn?
I think going wrong, if I take going wrong to mean not maximizing the position they're in or not making the right play, I think usually hesitation has probably something I've seen quite significantly. So I've seen businesses with good ideas wanting to get a product to market which would put them probably in a kind of market dominant position, or at least in the position where they could get to that. And there's been hesitation, be it internal company politics or branding or whatever it might be, that's meant that that's delayed and effectively a competitor's then stolen the march. I think we've seen that quite a lot in things like financial services, where you can make an argument to say that, you know, that the challenger banks have significantly outperformed the existing banks on digital proposition. And I think that steps back to missed opportunities. Prior, you know, they had excellent ideas and, you know, but going back to what the business is looking to achieve, I think there's just been a bit of a gap there where I think there's been a bit of a wrong footing. I think, if anything, to counter that though, probably in COVID, for not all but a majority of businesses in the digital sector, there was probably a very quick knee-jerk reaction to digital service growth, and I think the result of that and not having the planning has probably meant that some of that stuff is now incurring a cost on the business, or something that they're now having to face into. Just at the sheer pace, everyone kind of put the foot on the gas and really went for it in COVID.
It's gone from one extreme to another almost, hasn't it? So I guess
Yeah.
that kind of balance right, and that due diligence that you need to do at the beginning is really important. So just coming on to talk about technical debt then, does that become more of a problem as companies look at innovation moving forward? And what should a CTO prioritize when looking to address this issue with shifting back to innovation?
Yeah, it's good. So the buck stops with the CTO for tech debt, really. And I think there's two flavors of tech debt that a CTO probably is accountable for. So the first and probably easiest will be the strategic technical debt. So, you know, technical debt arising from, you know, strategic choices such as, you know, data center migrations to the cloud, that kind of thing. That usually is on a roadmap and is sort of well catered for. And I would say usually you'd have alignment at the C-level on those kind of items. They're probably more important and more impactful to how effectively your teams can deliver is the technical debt that they address themselves. Now, whilst you would expect the team to do that, you need to create the environment where technical debt can be addressed. So they need to have the remit to address technical debt. They need to be able to do it in a really pragmatic way, and you need to trust their judgment at times on whether it's technical debt that does need to be addressed, and that is correct. And I think going back to a previous point when I mentioned talking about building teams, is that alignment to the value and understanding, well, what is best for this product or this customer at that time, and then making a call on whether or not now is the right time for us to address this technical debt as part of the story, and this is going to enable us to do all this new stuff in the next sprint or when the next window is. So yeah, probably two parts there really, but you know, it's always a balance, I guess, isn't it, in terms of organizations and getting this right, and the hope is that you can create an environment where you get it right most of the time.
And will this be a CIO or CTO's key priority for next year, Pete, given the fact that lots of businesses have just kept the lights on, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's got to factor into the roadmap a little bit. How and where will depend a bit on the organisation. But it's harder to innovate if you're doing it on some shaking foundations. So getting some of the basics in place, catching up on a little bit of the remediation of tech debt might be a necessary starting point for an organisation to move forward from, and that's it's got to feature in that conversation, I think.
Talking about innovation, with innovation moving so quickly, how do you, as a human being, I know your brain never switches off, so I'm assuming you've got a really great answer to this, but how do you stay updated with trends? And how do you make sure you're current with your knowledge without just looking at every different new bit of kit in your bag or new technology that's coming to market or new innovation? How do you do that?
It's one of the things that I love about working in our industry and in our workplace, because you don't really have to go very far to find lots of different great examples of what's recent, what's current, and what's interesting. You know, whether it's because you're faced with dozens of projects at any one time, different industry challenges, new technologies that are emerging and people are having to play with. Within your workforce, you'll get on, you know, the Slack channels, people popping up at new articles and things on a daily basis that are catching your attention. And I think the thing about any consultant is that they're kind of quite naturally curious people. that then it's just a matter of following the bits that pique your interests. But I think because I work in an industry and environment and a workplace that's so infused with this stuff, I find it relatively easy to stay up to date and aware of what's going on because I see it every day, most days. And I just really follow the bits that capture my attention, to be quite honest, and the bits that sort of appeal to me.
It goes to the community aspect of it and culture, I think, as well. Like I'm, a website or whatever that tells me about a product or a new framework or something isn't generally that helpful. I think the reality is when someone's gone and had a look at it and given it a go. So I think things like people doing demos and presentations and having kind of open forums and probably even a little bit of an expectation that they share new stuff they've learned and things they think could be really good options for customers and projects as well.
Are there any kind of networks or groups that you've been part of that have really kind of helped you with, I guess, staying abreast of developments, or has it always come from more of your internal network, would you say?
Great question. And this is probably slightly a victim of COVID. So I would say the sort of meetup scene pre-COVID, for me, from a career perspective, was really useful. Obviously we're in Leeds today, and things like Leeds DevOps, etc. was an amazing community and opportunity to learn and meet other people and see technology in action. I do feel we have a new way of doing events and different types of events and things now, but I certainly feel that's been a bit of a loss probably for me personally. Maybe I'm just being romantic about how things used to be. Everything always evolves, but I think going back to Pete's response previously, though, I think people are naturally curious, and so there are avenues and they might vary, etc. From news outlets that people are reading and sharing on Slack or whatever, to demos people are putting together, or a battle event where it's AWS v Azure or whatever it might be. I think there's still methods, there's still options out there, people for learning, and that probably is the great thing about tech, isn't it? It's that you can go and learn so easily. It's such a, I know Pete said it before, it's just such a undervalued aspect to the industry, and knowing friends in things like architecture and things like that, like it is not that open, collaborative that we enjoy in technology.
So just coming on to innovation and things moving so quickly in technology, how on earth do you remain current, Pete? I mean, there's so many different new bits of kit coming to the market. Technology evolves so quickly. As a human being and as a leader, how do you do that?
Well, I think one thing you can't stay on top of everything. You've got to pick the things that appeal to you and I think suit your interests the best. I love being part of our industry and our environment because you're constantly inundated with different projects. People are experimenting with different technologies, and businesses have got very different challenges to resolve. So it's a really nice part of being in tech consultancy that you're constantly inundated with these things in a practical and applied way. So I'm lucky to be part of a world that's just infused in this stuff. And then afterwards, it's a kind of case of there's bits that really appeal to me, that kind of an actual curiosity draws me into, and I'll dig a bit deeper. And there's parts that I accept that other people are going to be the experts, and you come to rely on others to solve certain types of problem.
And I guess if you're a CIO, CTO that isn't working in a consultancy, that doesn't get that exposure to, I guess, different groups, different problems, different challenges, I can imagine that can feel quite lonely. How are there any kind of, I guess, external sources that you've used, Ed, or group or networking opportunities to help you develop your kind of knowledge? And
yeah, I've always enjoyed I would say participating in speaker panel discussion, but also just attending tech events in the local area. That evolves over time. Historically, we're in Leeds today, things like Leeds DevOps was something I used to go to almost every week, and for me that was a brilliant opportunity to learn what others were doing and how people were using different technologies. Whilst that was great then, times have changed. COVID happened, and we're now we've got access to much more hybrid events, which means perhaps maybe the quality isn't as good as if you were there in person for those kind of connections you get to the other people there, but However, you've then got 10 times as many events you could attend very easily, which probably wasn't the case in those days. But for me, it's, the as we talked about, the curious mind and willingness to learn, you will naturally tap into these. And I think there's a responsibility probably on, CTOs, CIOs there as well, in terms of creating a culture of learning inside your business and saying, actually, it is right on Friday afternoon that you take the afternoon off and you put together a presentation for the rest of the team on some new framework or whatever it might be that you found. And, very consciously highlighting, supporting and celebrating that is a great way to sort of create, more of that naturally through the workforce. And I think that then, you're creating a culture of learning within the organization, and then people have got, internal stuff that they may learn from colleagues and peers, and they've also got access to the great events and things. And there's probably a responsibility there on us at Enablis to be able to support and help those in the kind of regions we operate as well.
So do you think it's almost the CTO's role to be a mentor and help bring their team through with their understanding and kind of develop their knowledge around new technologies and innovation?
Absolutely. I think any C-level position, regardless of CTO or not, should always be approachable and should always be, have welcoming arms if someone wants to come along and say, hey, I'd like to get here in my career, or I'm looking to learn X, Y, and Z, to have those conversations. And on occasions, you'll mentor. Obviously, you can't mentor everyone. On occasions, you'll mentor people. On occasions, it'll be advice and, occasional catch-ups. And I think that is a really important role, I think, of in modern day, how organizations should be open and honest. And it's echoing that, creating that culture of sharing and learning, isn't it, in the same way? So
you mentioned there's a couple of people that had been really influential in your career early on. What about you, Pete? Is there any kind of standout people that really have helped shape the direction of your career?
Why was it me?
Yeah,
you can't say that.
no, I wouldn't. No, to be fair, actually, there's a lot of things I do look up to and admire in the way that Ed operates as a consultant, and I will touch upon that, the risk of embarrassing him. I always think that a really great consultant changes the environment they're in rather than them be affected by the environment themselves. Often as a consultant, you're going into places that are not ideal, not perfect. They've got difficulties and challenges around them. And most people, find it difficult to go into an environment like that and it not affect them. Like, they come home, they feel heavy from the difficulties that they face, all the challenges. The very best people in consultancy come home and it's them that's been affecting their environment, and other people have left that environment feeling a bit better about it. And I think that's something that Ed's actually really great at, to be honest. So that's something I won't say it too many times, but I admire that in Ed. And look, through my career, there's been so many people that I could point out and name, and people have inspired me in different ways around the workplace. I've been really lucky. Some of them are the same people Ed's mentioned, actually. Myself and Ed go back about 15 years probably in terms of working, not always on the same team, but in the same environments. And we've worked under some of the same sorts of leaders. So Andy Burton, who Ed mentioned earlier, we both obviously grew through that Infinity Work story as well, and worked closely with people like your Paul Henshaws, your Matt Gaffneys, and people like that were great figures to learn from. And I think I've been lucky that I've had quite a diverse set of people in my life that have been inspirational to me. I'm married to a woman that's a better engineer than I am, so that's quite she inspires me too. So yeah, there's lots of different people I think I've learned different things from.
Amazing. And final question. We've got lots of people that will be watching this podcast who, are at the beginning of their technology career, or maybe really looking to step up into a leadership role or even into a C-level role. What advice would you give to those people to help them kind of think about the things they need to consider?
Yeah, so I think for me, if we've just been talking about inspirational leaders, and I'd probably say for Pete here on this, I'd expect of all those people, the reason we saw them as inspirational was not just seeing them do what they do, but the fact that they would have a good conversation with you. So they were there to help mentor and support you as an individual. So I guess my first bit of guidance will be, forget progression frameworks and things like that at the moment. If there's somebody doing something in the business and you recognize they're brilliant at it and you don't have that string to your bow, it's just going to have a conversation with them about it. Like, how did you get so involved in the event scene? Or, how do you get your head out of the day to day and think about strategy? Whatever it is, look towards that and think, well, can I ask that person for help? It'd be very rare that the person says no. And if they say no, well, chin up and, look for other mentors in the business. But I think going out there and talking to others, don't just internalize it in terms of where you want to go. It might actually change your mind in terms of the types of roles that you look towards as well, based on, a lot of those conversations.
You've got to be prepared, haven't you, to put yourself out there and kind of expose yourself and say, "Look, can I help? Can you help me?" And not be afraid to do that.
Yeah, you're responsible for your destiny. It's not in the hands of the business that you join to get you to a certain thing. It's your responsibility. And then you can challenge that, the employer to help you get there.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've thought about a lot, and I think this is true for all levels of leadership, but the kind of more, the higher you go and the more abstracted you go, your success is defined as much by the things you don't do as the things that you do. And I found that, like, I think when anyone's new to leadership, it's tempting to try to listen to every piece of advice, every bit of feedback, hear what everyone says, try to action all of the things that you hear. And obviously, the more and more the responsibility you grow and the more you take on, the harder it gets to keep up with that. And it gets to a point where you've got to really filter and think, well, look, do I action the thing that I'm hearing, or do I just take that as a data point and actually add it to the memory bank? And if I hear enough things of that nature, then I'll maybe start to form an action around it. And obviously you can't live in a bubble. Like, you do have to listen to people, and you've got to take advice, and you do have to action some things. But I think developing that filter and that way of kind of judging what things should I act upon and what things do I leave alone. And to be quite honest, and I'm sure that there's people that are dealing in much bigger numbers than me, but it might be for every 10 things I hear, there's only one thing that I action, and it's picking the right one. That's the real key skill there. But I think being very conscious of that and knowing that you sometimes do make mistakes and get it wrong too, and that's okay. It's all part of learning. I think that's it for me. It's sometimes your successes are what you don't do as well as what you do.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. This is the first one we've ever done in person. So really appreciate your time.